The Balkans had already been set ablaze. Cyprus was gone. Kosovo had fallen. Bosnia teetered on the edge. But the next storm would not begin in the mountains of Macedonia or the valleys of Bosnia. It would erupt on the plains of Thrace. For weeks, Turkish forces had been gathering along the border near Edirne. Entire divisions redeployed from Anatolia, armored columns moving west beneath the cover of night. Bridges across the Evros River were sealed for military use. Locals whispered of endless convoys, tanks, self-propelled artillery, fuel trucks, stretching as far as the eye could see. Athens watched nervously. Greece had been humiliated with the fall of Cyprus. Now it braced for something worse, an assault on its own soil. Intelligence briefings warned that Turkey's massing army was not for show. The question was not if Ankara would strike, but when. The answer came before dawn. At 400 hours, the silence along the border shattered. Turkish artillery batteries east of Edirne thundered, their shells raining across the Evros River into Greek outposts. Radar stations near Orestiada lit up with incoming signatures. Communications posts went dark within minutes. Across the frontier, armored brigades surged forward. The battle for Thrace had begun. Columns of Turkish armor crossed the border bridges under covering fire, advancing toward Orestiada in the north and Komotini further south. Infantry followed close behind, feeding live coordinates back to fire control centers. Turkish aircraft screamed across the dawn sky, unleashing precision strikes on Greek artillery positions dug into the hills. The Greek defenders fought with desperation. Their artillery, though fewer in number, fired salvo after salvo into the advancing armor, knocking out lead vehicles and slowing the spearhead. Engineers blew charges along key bridges and culverts, forcing Turkish convoys to reroute through exposed ground. In the skies, Greek pilots scrambled from bases near Alexandroupoli, intercepting waves of Turkish fighters and bombers. Dogfights erupted high above Thrace, contrails scarring the morning sky, but the weight of numbers was against them. Turkish armored brigades pressed forward relentlessly. Mechanized infantry pushed through gaps, while heavy artillery batteries blanketed Greek strongpoints. Villages along the Evros were reduced to rubble. By midday, Turkish vanguards had bypassed Orestiada, forcing Greek units to fall back in disorder. Komotini was next under threat as mechanized battalions surged westward. Greece's defensive lines were crumbling. Local commanders begged for reinforcements, but reserves were already stretched thin, scattered between holding the islands in the Aegean and guarding the approaches to Thessaloniki. The government in Athens faced the grim prospect that Thrace itself might be lost. Still, resistance was fierce. In the wooded ridges west of Komotini, Greek infantry staged ambushes with anti-tank weapons, halting convoys long enough to evacuate civilians. Artillery hidden in olive groves struck at Turkish fuel trucks, sparking towering fires that lit the horizon. Yet for every Turkish column slowed, another pressed forward. By the third day, Turkish units had entered Xanthi. The city fell after hours of bitter fighting, its defenders withdrawing in fragments toward Kavala. Panic rippled through the Greek population. Refugees streamed westward, clogging the roads. Rumors spread in Athens that Thessaloniki itself might be the next objective. But then unexpectedly, the offensive stalled. Turkish high command ordered a halt to the advance beyond Xanthi. Columns that had been pressing toward Kavala dug in instead, fortifying captured ground. For Greek commanders, the pause was baffling but welcome, a breathing space they desperately needed. The reason lay far to the east. Reports emerged that in Turkey's remote provinces, Kurdish insurgents had risen once more. Entire battalions were being diverted back to the interior to contain the rebellion. Ankara, faced with the nightmare of fighting on two fronts, chose to consolidate its gains in Thrace rather than risk overextension. While Greece scrambled to regroup, another flashpoint threatened to widen the conflict. Along the northern frontier, near the Bulgarian border, a Turkish artillery barrage overshot its intended targets and detonated within Bulgarian territory. The incident sent shockwaves through Sofia. For decades, Bulgaria had walked a cautious line between its Balkan neighbors, but now its military went on full alert. Border defenses were reinforced, armored units redeployed, and air patrols expanded. Though Bulgaria had no desire to be dragged into war, the fear of escalation was palpable. Any further misstep could transform the conflict from a bilateral struggle into a full Balkan conflagration. For now, the front settled into uneasy silence. Turkey held a swath of Thrace, anchored on Xanthi. Greece, bloodied but unbroken, scrambled to fortify new defensive lines further west. In Athens, leaders weighed their next moves. The plains of Thrace lay scarred, villages burned, towns occupied, and armies facing one another across a fragile, shifting line. The war was far from over, but the real shock came from Bosnia. In Banja Luka, the Republika Srpska president gave a fiery televised speech. "We will not be a nation divided. The Republic of Srpska will stand with its Serbian brothers. We are one people, and we are one land." The broadcast rippled across the region. In Zagreb, Croatian leaders watched in horror. The Serbian-Croatian proxy conflict had just become something far more serious. The Croatian president sent a direct, unencrypted message to Belgrade. "Zagreb to Belgrade. Any attempt to absorb Republika Srpska will be met with full military force. Do not mistake our patience for weakness." The response from Belgrade was swift and unapologetic. "Belgrade to Zagreb. The will of the people will be honored. Interference will be considered an act of war." 4 hours later, Zagreb fired back with a sharper warning. "Zagreb to Belgrade. The Federation does not stand alone." The Two Seas Alliance stands ready to defend Bosnia. The two nations were now on a direct collision course, with Bosnia as the final battlefield. Belgrade, meanwhile, placed its army on high alert. Armored brigades were ordered to assemble near Užice, close to the Drina. Trains carried supplies westward under blackout conditions. Serbian generals spoke of defensive deployments. But the intent was clear. They were ready to cross if Republika Srpska called. But the Balkans had more than one fuse burning. In Tirana, Albania pressed its allies to finish what had begun in Kosovo. Secure lines carried a blunt appeal. Tirana, alliance leadership. Kosovo remains stolen ground. Now is the moment. United we strike and reclaim what was taken. Delay, and the chance is gone. The proposal sent ripples through the alliance, yet resistance emerged from Bulgaria. Fearful of Turkish retaliation after the Thrace incident, Sofia broke its silence with an unusually sharp rebuke. Sofia, alliance leadership. "No strike on Kosovo, not while Turkish armor sits across our border. You risk dragging us all into ruin." The message revealed the fracture: Albania pushing for escalation, Bulgaria pulling back in dread of Turkey. Macedonia, too, stirred quietly. Its eastern ridges remained under Bulgarian control, but in the shadows of the highlands, divisions began to gather. Hidden artillery positions were dug into clearings. Stockpiles of ammunition quietly expanded. Skopje's purpose was clear. With Bulgaria's gaze fixed southward on the Turkish threat, Macedonia prepared to exploit the distraction and reclaim the lands it had lost. It was a silent preparation. one that only a handful of generals knew was underway. Indeed, in Sofia, fear outweighed ambition. The incident on the border had rattled Bulgaria to its core. Mobilization orders poured across the southern frontier. Brigades dug trenches, artillery was pulled from storage, and defensive belts were thrown up across the mountains. But there was no appetite for a wider war. Every Bulgarian officer knew one more mistake with Turkey, and Sofia itself could become a battlefield. For now, the armies stared across borders, tense and waiting. But in Bosnia, the silence was already cracking. Local clashes between police units and paramilitaries spread near Doboj and Brčko. Roadblocks appeared overnight, manned by masked men with assault rifles. Sarajevo called it criminal disorder. Banja Luka called it self-defense. Both sides prepared for worse. The peninsula stood at the edge. Thrace smoldered. Macedonia waited. Bulgaria trembled. And in Bosnia, the embers glowed brighter with each passing night. The next fire was about to ignite.